Terry McLaurin got paid. We got bold predictions. We got fantasy nuggets for you. It's busy time. A lot of fantasy drafts going on. This is Fantasy Football Today on CBS Sports Network. I'm Jamey Eisenberg. That's Dave Richard. Joining us is Dan Schneier, and we are presented by BetMGM, the sports book born in Vegas. So we had our podcast today, Dave, right as we were wrapping up our Fantasy Football Today podcast. Please download that wherever podcasts are found. You said, you spoke it into existence. What if we wake up tomorrow morning and Terry McLaurin signs a new deal? How will you feel about his fantasy value? That was the question you posed to me. We said goodbye. We clicked the off button. It was us, not Heath Cummings. And sure enough, right away, we get the report Terry McLaurin signs his 3-year, $96 million extension. So
why do they mess with us like that?
They were listening to our show because everybody else does. How do you feel about Terry McLaurin now that he's locked in for the next 3 years after missing the entirety of preseason, all of the entirety of training camp, all the preseason games as a hold-in? Is he back in your good graces as a top 4-round fantasy wide receiver?
He is. It's toward the end of round 4. I'm good with him as a top 50 type of pick now because I expect him to be back at practice, I don't know, today, tomorrow. As soon as the ink's dried on that contract, he's going to be out there, and he's going to have a helmet and pads on, and he's going to be working to get his timing down again with Jayden Daniels. I think he's going to need more than 2 weeks before week 1 to really get it right. Let's give him a grace period of 2 weeks. So when you draft Terry McLaurin, assume the first 2 weeks of the season might not be peak Terry McLaurin. But after that, there's a week 3 game they play against Las Vegas. That secondary isn't very good. I could see Terry McLaurin starting to kick things into high gear then. And this was a great stat that Josh Norris looked up and posted on social media, and I piggybacked off it. 11 red zone touchdowns for Terry McLaurin in his first 80 games. 10 last year with Jayden Daniels, and 7 of the 10 came in the back half of last year when Jayden Daniels was really finding himself as a thrower. His numbers in fantasy really lit up. I'm kind of excited about him now, but I don't want to reach for him, and I'm afraid that's what's going to happen, Jamey, is that people are going to see this news, and they're going to run to Terry McLaurin like nothing was ever wrong, and they're going to take him in round 3, and that feels just a little too rich for me.
Dan, when you look at the signing of McLaurin, as Dave alluded to, last year he was great. But what we saw last year was targets relatively the same, catches relatively the same, yards relatively the same, spike in touchdowns. As we see here, 13 touchdowns. There was no Deebo Samuel. We'll see what changes now with the backfield without Brian Robinson there. Obviously, we're expecting it better. Jayden Daniels, which could lead to better production from Terry McLaurin. But just your assessment of the Commanders' offense and where Terry McLaurin sort of fits in for you.
Yeah, for me, he's not someone I'm rushing to draft, and this is because I think he's one of the prime touchdown regression candidates, as you mentioned. Now, I thought that stat was excellent, Dave, but one of my concerns is the addition you mentioned of Deebo Samuel. I've liked what I've seen from Deebo Samuel this preseason. I know he had that one clip going around early in training camp in the spring. People thought he might be out of shape. He looked pretty good on his first touch of the preseason, and I think he's a perfect fit for that scheme. McLaurin, to me, is a player who will not get a heavy volume enough to justify what I think is a pretty high ADP.
It's going to be interesting to see where his ADP goes because he's been kind of hovering in that round 4 or 5-ish range. As Dave said, we may see him get pushed back up into, I think, maybe the middle of round 4. So when we're talking about wide receivers like Marvin Harrison Jr., Garrett Wilson, Devontae Adams, depending on where George Pickens goes, kind of those type of wide receivers, I'm just going to basically say I'm out on still Terry McLaurin. I know this is great news, the fact that he got in still, over a week plus before the start of the regular season, and I think you're right. It may take a couple of weeks, and then hopefully he's back to being exactly where he was. But I think Dan said it best. We're going to see some touchdown regression. Whether he goes from 13 to 10, that's still pretty good. If he goes from 13 to kind of that 5-6 range, which is where he's been his entire career, then we could be in a little bit of trouble for Terry McLaurin. And I'll just go back to this very small sample size, small group of players. The hold-ins, the holdouts from the last 2 seasons, all but Jamar Chase. We're talking about Josh Jacobs and Jonathan Taylor in 2023, CeeDee Lamb and Brandon Ayuk last year. The other one is Chase. Chase was awesome, won the Triple Crown. Those other 4 guys, they all struggled with their production and dealt with injuries the last 2 years. So we'll see what happens for them. And we'll also see what happens for the San Francisco receiving corps because we have a situation that we're still monitoring at this point with Jauan Jennings. So we have one report from the San Francisco Standard. This is just a reporter speculating based on what Kyle Shanahan's kind of said, that we could be looking at Jauan Jennings maybe opening the season on injured reserve. He's got this calf injury, but also wanting a new contract. So how injured is he, or is he still kind of just playing this out because of the contract situation? That's a conflicting report because ESPN's Adam Schefter, according to Shanahan, says that Jennings could be ready for week 1 as they take on the Seahawks. So Dan, when you look at this, Ricky Pearsall has just been flying up, average draft position, flying up draft boards. Brandon Ayuk has been falling down draft boards, and Jennings kind of stayed in the middle here with just kind of this uncertainty. So how do you assess Pearsall with maybe Jennings not starting the season or coming back? When Jennings does return, how are you going to value him, and what about Ayuk?
I'm very high on Pearsall, but I worry that I'll never get him in drafts. I did 2 salary cap drafts this weekend, didn't have a chance at him. He went in pricing of a tier 3 range. And in snake drafts, I see him getting jumped for. And the issue with Pearsall is, yes, he was a former first-round pick, but at some point this season, Jennings is going to play, and at some point Ayuk is going to play. So I feel like the ADP for Pearsall, and maybe it's not the ADP, but maybe just the draft buzz for Pearsall has maybe exceeded the upside, or it's kind of reached the ceiling of what he can be. I'm still targeting Jennings because at this point you can get him super late. And with that report, I'm sure that ADP, it's going to fall even further. And I feel like Ayuk is also a pretty good bet, especially in leagues where you can place him on your IR and free up a roster spot.
The problem, though, is if you draft Jennings or if you draft Ayuk, it's easy to stash Ayuk in the injury spot, like Dan said, but you've got to make sure that you have that in your league first and foremost. With Jennings, we don't know when he's going to play, and I love the value on him. That's round 10. I'm looking at our ADP right now. He's one of the biggest fallers in ADP on CBSSports.com, and so I think that there's a real opportunity cost here that's great for Jauan Jennings. But I love the talent of Ricky Pearsall. We saw it late last season, 3 games. When he had at least 25 routes run, he averaged over 18 PPR points per game. That's outstanding. That means that no matter where you're drafting Ricky Pearsall, he's a bargain if he's going to deliver that. And if Jennings isn't ready to begin the year, that's a great pathway for Pearsall to get rolling with 7-8 targets per game. That's rare to see that from a 49ers wide receiver, but he and Kittle are going to dominate targets in that offense, and I think he'll do really well with them. I'm excited about Pearsall.
Could get you off to a great start, depending on how long Jennings is out or takes some time to ramp up, and then clearly Ayuk, as according to Shanahan earlier this offseason, saying that he may not be ready until week 6, so something to keep an eye on there as we get through some cuts and roster movement over the next several days. We also had the trade last week of the 49ers acquiring Brian Robinson Jr., and then Shanahan coming out this weekend and saying, quote, "We brought him here to be our number 2 back." So, Dave, when the trade first happened, you said it could still be Garendo as that number 2 guy, but it appears as if the 49ers are all in on Brian Robinson. When are you targeting Robinson as now the new handcuff for Christian McCaffrey, who, as we know, only played 4 games last season?
Well, this is the biggest faller in ADP on CBS Sports. You can now get him in round 10, and I think that that's a fair price to pay for a guy that would see a lot of work in a really good offense for running backs if something were to happen to Christian McCaffrey. The thing is, right now, McCaffrey's healthy, should be good to go. Hopefully, we don't really see Brian Robinson play that much, but yes, he is the handcuff. He should be taken in round 10.
Dan, we got a lot of questions about, is this an impact on McCaffrey? How's this going to work? Knowing that this guy's got a lot bigger profile than a Garendo or a Jordan James or the other guys that were there. Do you have any concern about Christian McCaffrey and his fantasy value?
No concern about McCaffrey, who's been in my top 3 all offseason, but I will say this. When we were looking at the 49ers situation before the trade, there was not really anyone healthy behind McCaffrey, so it felt like it could be a Barkley level, volume and touches situation. I think that Robinson will cut into his workload a little bit, but McCaffrey's never been a player who relies on that. He relies on passing game targets and touchdowns.
Yeah, and hopefully Robinson doesn't take those touchdowns, but it'd be very surprising if that was the case. So feel very comfortable and confident saying draft McCaffrey in round 1, and hopefully we don't have any injury situations to worry about throughout the course of the season. We do have an injury in Miami that we're keeping an eye on. That's Devon Achane. So Mike McDaniel making people feel a little bit better if you're drafting that. As of now, there's no setbacks for Achane, and he expects him to practice prior to week 1. Whether he's going to be ready for week 1, that remains to be seen. We've seen Ollie Gordon, another guy, big-time riser in average draft position, flying up draft board, somebody that I think people are looking for as early as round 9, round 10. Dan, how are you approaching the Dolphins' backfield right now? Achane was a round 1 pick for us a couple weeks ago. Then he suffers his calf injury. Now he's fallen into round 2.
I'm avoiding Achane. I think, Scott Pianowski of Yahoo Sports said it best. Injuries will find you in your fantasy season. Don't go drafting the guys already injured, and that's unfortunately where we're at with Achane. He's had injuries in the past. The player I'm targeting is Ollie Gordon. Ollie Gordon was a pre-draft favorite of mine, not the typical player I like, but when you watched his film, especially his 2023 tape, and I somewhat throw out his 2024 tape because Oklahoma State's defense was so bad they were never playing with any kind of decent game script. But if you put on 2023 tape, he reminded me a lot of DeMarco Murray, high runner, but really good at creating space before contact, and I just think he's a different kind of back for the Dolphins. And Mike McDaniel has done some wacky things these past 2 years, and he's found a way to create crazy production for players like Jonnu Smith. I think he could find a role for Gordon in his offense that's different than you would find for a player like Jalen Wright. So he's a player I like at the end of my drafts.
2 years ago, Raheem Mostert, nobody expected to, led the NFL in rushing touchdowns. Last year, Devon Achane led all running backs in receptions. So he's gotten great production from this backfield. And Ollie Gordon, one of 3 running backs in the last 2 seasons to get over 2,000 total yards in college, the other 2 being Ashton Jeanty and Cam Scatterbo. So nice resume there for Ollie Gordon, who did struggle in 2024 by comparison to 2023. Dave, Chargers GM Joe Hortiz said that he's hopeful Najee Harris can play in week 1. Now, I don't think that's going to necessarily dramatically change Najee Harris's draft stock, but it could change Omarion Hampton's draft stock, who you said you may consider taking in round 2. If Najee plays in week 1, would you still take Hampton in round 2?
Yeah, I would, because I'm banking long-term on talent, and I think the opportunity will be huge for Omarion Hampton in a Chargers offense that wants to run the football. Remember last year how we were all so nervous about Justin Herbert, and it played out in like the first third of the year. Well, they couldn't really run the football that well, especially after J.K. Dobbins got hurt. They had nothing left. So what did the Chargers do this offseason? First, they got Najee Harris. Then they drafted Omarion Hampton. And then Najee had an accident on July 4th. Hampton went to training camp. He was the clear lead running back from the second training camp started, and he hasn't let up since. The reports have been great. He's looked good in preseason games. I think we're going to see Omarion Hampton have the type of workload that maybe even Ashton Jeanty will get when we're talking about a rookie running back getting a ton of carries, catches. He should have a lot of high-value numbers there. And we know that Najee isn't an efficient running back to begin with. So I would prefer, of course I'm going to prefer to get Omarion Hampton in round 3. His ADP on CBS right now is in early round 4. If I had to take him in late round 2, would I do it? I would, because I do believe in the talent and the opportunity that he'll have in this Chargers offense.
Lots of upside, just hopefully he can live up to the hype. We've seen, sometimes these rookies get sort of stunted by these veterans, and Najee Harris, for what it's worth, it's just, kind of ironic. He goes his entire first 4 years of his career without an injury. Before he gets to the first game for the Chargers, he's already dealing with an injury. So hopefully he's okay, and is more of a handcuff, though, for Hampton, for anybody who is drafting or planning to draft Hampton late round 2 or early round 3. Dan, we have another injury, last one to talk about here, and that's Jayden Blue suffering a low ankle sprain, according to ESPN, in the game against the Falcons over the weekend in their final preseason outing. Blue has kind of been a guy that I think a lot of fantasy managers are looking at and saying maybe he could take over the Cowboys' backfield at some point, but still Javonte Williams is going to be most likely the starter. Just give me your take on the Cowboys' backfield, and are you still trying to target Blue in drafts despite this injury?
Yeah, just a rough first offseason for Blue. Before this injury, was dealing with a heel injury that sidelined him throughout a lot of training camp. Hasn't gotten the reps to make an impact now, but I think he will make an impact in the second half of the season. So I am still drafting Blue. He was one of my preseason favorites. Love his speed, love his ability in the passing game. I feel like he can give the Cowboys the impact a player like Tony Pollard has given them in previous seasons down the stretch run. But he's going to be a guy that you should really only draft if you have deep benches and place to stash him. If you're in a short bench league, I would not draft Jayden Blue.
Yeah, and Javonte is going to be somebody I think that can help you in the beginning part of the season, maybe as a low-end flex, maybe an RB2 if you're in a deeper league, but not somebody I think you want to rely on for the majority of the year. The Cowboys' offensive line could be a mess, and we expect them to throw the ball a lot. Plus, as Dan just alluded to, we could see Jayden Blue playing a big role maybe as the season goes on, especially once his heel and his ankle are healthy. All right, we're going to take a break right now on Fantasy Football Today. When we come back and get into Dave's bold predictions, going to tell you why Breece Hall, maybe not at the start of the season, could be great by the end of the season. You don't want to miss this next on FFT. Welcome back to Fantasy Football Today, presented by BetMGM, the sportsbook born in Vegas. I'm Jamey, that's Dave, that's Dan, and it's time to get bold. And you have a Fantasy Football Hall of Famer here giving you bold predictions for the 2025 campaign. All right, Dave, here we go.
I always laugh at that. Like there isn't like an actual Hall of Fame for fantasy. I don't even know how
Isn't
it
that
really
your jersey
works.
right there hanging up?
No, no. I think
right.
never mind. Go
All
ahead.
right, bold prediction number 1 from Dave Richard. Breece Hall and Tyreek Hill will have great per-game averages after they get traded.
Yeah, these are supposed to be fun, right?
Yep.
We don't need to have boring, bold predictions.
Correct.
So let's have a little fun. Breece Hall and Tyreek Hill are two guys that fantasy managers tend to gravitate toward because of their names, and we've had great success from them before. We know that Breece Hall is going to be sharing with 2 other running backs and 1 other quarterback in New York, and he even admitted that he wasn't their guy, the coaching staff's guy. So maybe they move him at some point this season, and when they do, he'll land with a team that will want to utilize him for his strengths. Tyreek Hill is almost the exact same thing. I wonder if he's kind of falling out of favor with Tua. I know the Dolphins need him if they want to have a really good offense. He didn't practice against Jacksonville in their joint practice. He didn't play in the preseason. I think he's healthy. So I don't know what's going on there, but it makes me nervous to draft both of these guys. In fact, I wouldn't look at either one of them until round 4 at the absolute earliest. And that might be a mistake when it comes to Tyreek Hill, but I don't think it's that big of a mistake for Breece Hall. But when they change teams, they could end up in much better situations, much better offenses, certainly much better quarterback in the case of Tyreek Hill, and you could see their numbers pop.
I'm with Dave mostly on this. I've avoided Breece Hall, though, in most drafts, despite the potential for a second-half season boom. You don't typically see a lot of running back trades at the deadline. Hill seems like more likely to get traded, which I actually think would hurt his fantasy value. I've been drafting some of Hill because he keeps falling, but I think he kind of needs to be in that scheme, in that offense with the rapport down with Tua. I think if he changes systems, it's a very complicated thing for a receiver to do midseason.
The only place I could see his numbers really going up would be his Rashee Rice suspension lasts for a significant amount of time, and the Chiefs are like,
all right,
we can get Tyreek cheap. Maybe the Dolphins pick up some of the contract, draft capital, not so much.
Yep.
He steps into Dan's point. He doesn't have to learn the system because he knows that, at least the majority of it. That's where one I could see, but it could be a little tough to see their numbers get better in their current situation.
I think any type of offense that's like the Dolphins' offense, and there are spawns of it all over the league, would love to have Tyreek Hill.
Bold prediction number 2, and this ties into the guy that just got paid today, so Terry McLaurin. Terry McLaurin finishes as a top 12 wide receiver from Halloween through New Year's. And just to put the asterisk on it, you did give this bold prediction prior to the news of McLaurin signing. So,
and it
how much
shouldn't
do you
really
still
change.
feel about
In
it?
fact, I should feel a little bit better about McLaurin now that we know that he's officially signed on the dotted line, and he should be impactful for most of the year with the Commanders. But I could see Washington really trying to get hot in the second half of the year. The first half, they try and figure out their run game. This is a team that could trade for Breece Hall if Bill Krosky-Merritt can't get it done, if Austin Eckler falls prey to Father Time. And that means that they are going to throw the ball a lot more, and I think McLaurin can finish strong, just as he did last year for the Commanders.
Yeah, we touched on this earlier. I just have a little bit of concerns with McLaurin. I have concerns about this offense potentially taking a step back. We've seen in past years Cliff Kingsbury's offensive scheme been figured out in Arizona now. This is a new version of Kingsbury. He went across the world to kind of refine himself, and it was excellent in year 1, but there are still concerns I have on that offensive line that I thought overperformed last season. And Debo, I really think Debo will be a huge part of this offense. So McLaurin is just a player who I can't grasp where the volume is coming from. And I think the touchdown numbers will have to be high for him to really return value.
It would be probably timeline-wise make sense that, middle to the end of October, he starts to get his legs underneath him, starts to look like the guy he was. I don't know if you want to ride it out or maybe trade him right before your trade deadline, just because who knows how the end of the season will go.
Sure.
But, depending on how McLaurin looks in the beginning part of the year, could be a trade chip for you if he does start to get hot, particularly toward the end of October. All right, this one I know you love. Tyler Warren, the bold prediction. Tyler Warren leads the Colts in targets, catches, receiving yards, receiving touchdowns, hot dogs eaten, everything the Colts
Autographs
could
signed.
potentially do. Tyler Warren's going to lead them in all categories.
Yeah, I think that there's actually a decent chance of this happening. I don't know if that means that it's not as bold of a prediction, but I love the talent. I think he's going to be utilized to his strengths. It would make sense for them to do that. Although I don't know if everything that the Colts are doing these days necessarily makes sense. But what they really needed was somebody to open up the middle of the field and somebody to take some pressure off of everybody else in this offense. And I think Warren gives them that. And we saw him make plays not just inside of 10 yards from the line of scrimmage, but down the field, 20-plus yard plays in the preseason. And he's going to be tough for defenses to cover. And I actually think it helps him that Daniel Jones is the quarterback because he's just got a little bit of a better arm than Anthony Richardson does at this point. So I'm a big fan of Warren. I'm getting him in round 8 in every league I'm in.
And I absolutely love this take by Dave. If I'm not mistaken, Warren has played every single snap of the first team this preseason. That to me stands out. Ultimately, I don't think you have to do much to lead the Colts in receiving touchdowns with Daniel Jones at quarterback. He's had one season over 20 passing touchdowns. So that might cap his upside to some extent. But like Dave said, you still can get him in round 8 where he could be a massive value there, even if he only has 5 or 6 touchdowns.
And Josh Downs still dealing with a hamstring injury. Michael Pittman battled a back injury last year. Either of those guys missing time just makes it that much more attractive for Tyler Warren to step in and be the guy that the Colts need. I do think we're going to see Anthony Richardson at some point. I would take Anthony Richardson's arm over Daniel Jones. You said Jones had a better arm. I think accuracy. Daniel Jones has much more accuracy.
Okay, that's fair.
Than Anthony Richardson.
Well, if I'm a pass catcher, especially one that's not going to be used a ton deep down the field, I want the accurate arm.
Next bold prediction. Dan's going to love this one. Jackson Dart becomes a top 12 fantasy quarterback. Caleb Williams does not. So if you just take a look at Dan's background, he's got a bunch of giant magnets on his refrigerator, including what is supposed to be their record, which is 0-0 right now. So maybe Jackson Dart comes in and the Giants take off from there.
I think he's their best quarterback right now. Now, I'm not obviously in charge of the Giants. Otherwise, I'd be somewhere else right now and probably with a shaved head and more money in my wallet. But I do think that Jackson Dart has acquitted himself well in the preseason and in training camp, showing a lot of what I saw on film from him at Ole Miss. And I think he can really make this offense move. We know that he's done these great things in the preseason games without Malik Neighbors on the field. Just imagine how effective he'd be. So I think there will come a time when Russell Wilson might cost the Giants a game or two, and they make the pivot to Jackson Dart, and he takes off. The Dart in his last name, by the way, that's for his legs. He's a running quarterback on top of a good thrower. So I think he could be actually excellent for fantasy. Caleb Williams was someone we were all very, very excited about before training camp started. And then as training camp rolled on, the Bears have had some issues. First with him, and he seems to have gotten a little bit better on simple things like getting the ball out quick and handling the quarterback-center exchange. The offensive line's a real problem, and I think he's going to get flustered easily by the pressure that defense has put on him starting week 1 against the Vikings.
So just one answer. Is this a one-word answer? Is this a pro-Dart bold prediction or an anti-Williams bold prediction?
Yes.
There you go. Dan, Jackson Dart, are you drafting him as a backup quarterback in redraft leagues?
In Superflex and two quarterback formats, sure. I think the most important takeaway from the preseason is the Giants' offense changed with Dart in versus Russell, and it's nothing like they ran with Jones or Russ. It was up-tempo, a lot of hurry-up, a lot of spread, a lot of easy routes on the outside, RPOs, and design runs for Dart. That's all good things for fantasy football purposes. And we've already seen Dable coax out a really strong fantasy season out of Daniel Jones in 2022. He can't even hold, Jackson Dart is a much more talented quarterback there, so I could see it happening.
You want an impromptu bold prediction? Giants make the playoffs.
There you go. Well,
wow. With that schedule?
Make the playoffs. You heard it here first.
Those magnets will be moving quite a bit. Let's last bold prediction for you, Dave, and then we'll take a break and go to Dan's bold predictions.
All right.
Bold prediction number 5. Rashee Rice is a bust because his suspension is longer than anticipated, but Xavier Worthy finishes as a top 15 wide receiver.
Everybody's drafting Worthy ahead of Rashee Rice right now anyway, but some people think Rashee Rice is only going to be suspended for 4 games or 6 games. I think the NFL tries to come down hard on him. I'm worried that it's going to come at a point in the fantasy season where fantasy managers are going to want this guy available on their teams to start, and instead he's sitting on the bench for longer than they had hoped for, and that makes him a disappointment, whereas Worthy, still has that great speed. The Chiefs have talked all offseason about trying to attack downfield. Worthy will allow them to do exactly that, and I think Worthy will be great for fantasy.
Dan, you buying this one that Rice will be a bust and Worthy will be top 15?
Not that Rice will be a bust, but I am buying Worthy as top 15 and the player you want to target in that Chiefs wide receiver core. I think with Worthy, a lot of the situation was last year he was learning a difficult offense with Andy Reid. Once he got acclimated to it, we saw his role expand a little bit in the second half, and that will continue for him, I think.
I'm just so curious when both are active, first 4 games of the season, then whatever happens with Rice after that, how good will Worthy be? Because everything Worthy did last year was without Rice on the field. Mm-hmm. And if you just watch the preseason, Mahomes and Rice are locked in. I mean, they are good to go right now. So those first 4 games, I don't think Rice will be a bust. Season long obviously depends on how long he's going to miss. But those first 4 games could be amazing for Rice, maybe a little bit of a disappointment for Worthy, and then we'll see what happens moving forward from there. But as Dave told you, we'll see what happens with the length of suspension for Rice. What will that be for his value and for Worthy's value as well? All right, we're going to take a break right now. We come back. It's Dan's turn. Give you some bold predictions, how much he likes James Cook, how much he likes Trevor Lawrence. That's next on FFT. Welcome back to Fantasy Football Today, presented by BetMGM. I'm Jamey, that's Dave, and that is 2-time Draftathon tennis champion Dan Schneier.
Oh, wow.
Under the spotlight for his bold predictions for 2025.
Let's go.
So, Dan, Mr. Tennis, let's start with James Cook. You have James Cook, bold prediction, will finish as a top 10 fantasy running back.
Yeah, being drafted way outside of it. And I've done a bunch of salary cap drafts. He hasn't been bid on much at all. But what I see with James Cook is an elite player who has a 4.9 career yards per carry average. He also has, in my mind, elite speed, elite vision, and he's playing behind an elite offense with an elite offensive line. They were 7th best, the Bills, last season in yards before contact at 2.39. That's the Bills' offensive line returning all players there. And James Cook, he was tied for 5th best in forced missed tackle rate with Bijan Robinson, and 3rd best in yards per carry on man gap runs at 5.25 yards per carry. And if you see the progression of his career with Ken Dorsey versus now what he has Joe Brady at offense coordinator, it's night and day. He has 83 red zone carries versus just 29 with his former coordinator, 17 touches per game. That's up from 9. He's become a focal point of this offense. And when I watch James Cook on film, this is what I really come back to. It does remind me of one player. It's Dalvin Tomlinson. I'm sorry, not Dalvin. It's Dalvin Cook,
Tomlinson,
brother. Sorry,
little
slip up. Little giant slip up there. It's Dalvin Cook, his brother. They have that unique ability to just create yards before contact with their vision and their ability to kind of cut at any point and house a run. So I understand people are scared that 40% of his production came from touchdowns last season, but I don't think he needs to repeat his touchdown count to get into the top 10.
I think there's a greater chance of him increasing his total yardage than there is of him seeing a major decrease in touchdowns. And 18 touchdowns is crazy, but he could still get to 12 or 13 and still work his way up to 1,400, 1,500 yards and maybe sprinkle on a couple of extra catches on top of that and be worth, certainly worth a round 3 pick, which is where we really see him going, but a round 2 pick as well. This is the offense that you want to pick players from that are going to go off, and James Cook clearly one of them.
And I think, to be fair, based on sort of where his average draft position has settled at this point, he's not so far outside the top 10. I'm not questioning your bold prediction call because I think people sort of get to that number of where Bucky Irving, Josh Jacobs, Jonathan Taylor, Chase Brown is, Kyron Williams is, kind of just say, okay, that's where the tier break becomes. So that's basically the 12th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th running backs in average draft position. And kind of just then Cook is in that next group with Omarion Hampton and Alvin Kamara and maybe Trevion Henderson, those group of guys. Cook can easily get back to that level of production if the touchdowns stay in the range that kind of Dave put them in. But yeah, it's a very strong call for a lot of people that were running the opposite direction from James Cook.
Right.
Trevor Lawrence, your next bold prediction. Trevor Lawrence will finish as a top six quarterback.
Yeah.
Wow. Tell us why.
Yeah, walk with me on this one a little bit. Liam Cohen arrives at Kentucky, takes a prospect, Will Levis, turns him into consideration for a first-round pick in the NFL draft. I think we've all kind of seen what Will Levis is at the NFL level. Then he goes to Tampa. He arrives and he has Baker Mayfield, and he coaxes out a career year, 4,500 passing yards, 41 touchdowns. Cohen understands how to scheme open space, and he understands the value of solving problems in the passing game by getting his playmakers the ball in 2 ways. 1, in space in both the run game and the screen game, and 2, on those in breakers. He really leaned on that with Mike Evans last year, and Brian Thomas was one of the best receivers from an efficiency standpoint on in-breaking routes, slants, in-breakers, deep overs over the middle. This is something we saw in his LSU tape. Wasn't used that often last season in the Jacksonville offense. He's going to eat on those this year. And then getting the ball in space to Hunter and those 3 running backs who I all think are really talented in space, Tootin, Bigsby, and ETN. It's going to open up these vertical shots in the passing game, one-on-one situations. So this is a bet a lot on the coach here, but we've bet on coaches before, and they've paid it off in fantasy football. And there is still that number 1 overall pick talent with Trevor Lawrence. I think he still has the arm talent. He just has to be better and quicker at solving problems with his mind. I think Cohen's the guy to do that for him. And we're drafting a lot of these other quarterbacks with 2 elite receivers, and I do believe Hunter will be immediately an elite receiver in the NFL based on his college tape. Much higher than Trevor Lawrence. So I'm all in on this offense. Maybe not 4,540 passing yards and 41 TDs. Baker was finished as what? You probably know this, Jamey, where Baker finished last year.
Quarterback.
Top 3. But just a little outside that, settling in the top 6 for me.
So the bad news is, and Dan touched on this a little bit, like Trevor's never really shown us this as a quarterback.
Some flashes.
Yeah, but not consistency. And even in a joint practice that I went to against the Dolphins, he was off target a little bit, had a couple of ugly interceptions. Those are the types of things that hold me back. The good news is you don't have to draft him like a top 6 quarterback. In fact, you can draft him to be your second quarterback. You can do it in round 12 and round 13. And if you don't like what you see after the first few weeks of the season, you dump him, you go find another quarterback or somebody at a different position off the waiver wire, and it's no harm, no foul. There is gobs of upside here because of Cohen, who I agree, very, very sharp play caller, and also the 2 receivers that he throws to.
I think the one thing that kind of goes unsaid with Trevor Lawrence is his running ability. He's got 2 seasons on his resume with at least 330 rushing yards. And what we see from Baker last year, a huge spike in his rushing potential. And I think that's something that we'll see from Trevor Lawrence. If he can get to north of 400 rushing yards, maybe close to 5, we could be talking about an easy top 6 quarterback here if he stays healthy and leans on his pass catchers and does well in this offense. A pass catcher that you're not so fond of, that is Garrett Wilson. And your bold prediction here is Garrett Wilson finishes outside the top 25 at wide receiver. Why?
Yeah, with Wilson, last year he finished as a top 10 wide receiver overall, but he was just wide receiver 17 in points per game in PPR and wide receiver 30 in points per route. But he ran the most routes of any wide receiver in the NFL. Or sorry, he had the highest snap share, and he was top 3 in routes of any wide receiver in the NFL. Now he gets out of that Rodgers-led Hackett system that was very pass-heavy, and he goes to this Aaron Glenn-led team that really seems to be leaning toward the run game. In addition to that, he loses Aaron Rodgers, who wasn't the best quarterback in the NFL, but he gets Justin Fields, who really may not be somebody who we can rely on for more than 200 yards passing a game and 15 to 18 passing touchdowns. So it's really difficult for me to see where the production is coming from. I assume that the targets will come down, the overall volume will come down massively in this offense. He's also running a system that's not so great for him with this quarterback. And then lastly, the touchdowns aren't going to be there. So where are the fantasy points coming from? And are we just drafting Garrett Wilson based on where he finished overall last season, not even on a per route or a per game basis?
I want to kind of tie in your next bold prediction and ask Dave about these 2 guys collectively, because you have George Pickens finishing as a top 12 wide receiver. So obviously you're going to take Pickens over Wilson. Dave, who would you draft first? Would you be drafting Garrett Wilson at this point or George Pickens?
What's the format? If it's
PPR.
If it's full PPR, I think I would just have to lean toward Garrett Wilson. But it is with reluctance because there's been so much hype about George Pickens, and we know that that's a Dallas offense. Hey, they've got a great thrower in Dak Prescott. You could see Dak Prescott, and we have seen Dak Prescott support 2 wide receivers before in fantasy football. So I think that there could be a little bit more upside for Pickens, especially if it's half or non-PPR, because I think he'll make more explosive plays. He'll have more of those opportunities. Dan's right. This Jets offense, it's going to be run heavy, and when it does get forced into being pass heavy, I don't know if Justin Fields is the right guy for that. I think we're drafting Garrett Wilson because last year he averaged over 9 targets per game. I don't think there's a chance he sees anywhere near 9 targets per game this year.
Right.
Dan, your thoughts on Pickens?
Yeah, so Pickens is one of my 3 flag plant players. It was Cook, Pickens, and we'll get to the last one next. And I think he will finish as a top 12 because he's finally met his perfect match, and it's Dak Prescott. Dak Prescott's ability to anticipate and throw with accuracy allows players like George Pickens to win on the outside one-on-one. And that's something we saw when he had Michael Gallup early in his career. But Pickens is a much better player. He's steadily improved, and I'll shout out Matt Harmon's reception perception in all metrics as a receiver since he entered the NFL. He always could beat press man on the outside, but now he's become this excellent winner on the in-breakers, the quick slants, the quick ins, and a lot of that has to do with what he's been able to do after the catch. He forced 10 missed tackles in the open field last season with the Steelers. That was just 1 fewer than Justin Jefferson. There's really nothing about his game I don't like. People could say the deep speed, but his ability to release clean off the line of scrimmage and stack vertically in the vertical passing game, stack DBs vertically, allows him to win there too. So Dak Prescott is just the perfect quarterback fit for him, I think. He's going to allow him to unlock his ability on those in-breaking routes in the middle of the field, and he could take those after the catch for extra yards. He had 8 touchdowns his freshman year at Georgia. Hasn't had a lot of touchdowns in the NFL because the Steelers have been bottom 3 in passing TDs since he got on that team. I think we could be looking at a totally different situation in Dallas with their defensive issues and their run game issues. We could be looking at a lot of shootouts, a lot of volume, and I think he's going to get to double-digit touchdowns.
He was the focal point of the passing game in Pittsburgh last year, but the first 4 of the first 6 games with Russell Wilson last year, he was 16 PPR points or better. Then he got hurt, did not finish that strong, but when he had a veteran quarterback, a guy that would give him some opportunities to win, he was clearly producing at a high level. Again, sharing the field with CeeDee Lamb. Don't forget about Jake Ferguson, but could be a great situation for George Pickens this year. All right, Dan, last bold prediction for you. Dave likes run rookie tight end. You like another one. Colston Loveland finishes as a top 6 tight end for you. That's the bold prediction.
Yeah, to be fair, I also do love Warren, but I like Loveland more. And the 2024 Lions under Ben Johnson scored more fantasy points on play action dropbacks. And this is a shout out to Jacob Gibbs from Beyond the Box Score. You can check out our show there on CBS Sports and the YouTube page. But this is his stat on play action dropbacks. Ben Johnson's offense scored more fantasy points than any team in the last 8 years. And play action and motion have been cheat codes for fantasy from an efficiency standpoint for NFL coordinators. And no one has done a better job scheming those opportunities up in play action game than Ben Johnson. Last year, Sam Laporta ranked 8th most fantasy points in PPR on play action passes. Before that, Brock Wright averaged over 3 PPR points on play action passes. Enter Colston Loveland, the 10th overall pick, and an all-22 film junkie like myself's hero. Loveland separated at all 3 levels on tape. He made plays extending away from his frame, and more importantly for me, he showed the ability to take crossers and routes that break over the middle of the field for yards after the catch. Everyone is asking who Ben Johnson's Amon-Ra St. Brown will be in this offense. I still think Loveland has the skill sets that best fits that role of anyone on the Bears roster, including Luther Burden, who's not really running with the first team. So I think that this is a breakout season immediately for Loveland, and he's somebody I've just drafted in almost every league.
I don't hate the call, and this is just like the Trevor Lawrence one, where you don't have to draft Colston Loveland as the 6th tight end off the board. You can draft him as the 10th or 11th. But there are definitely a lot of mouths to feed in this Bears offense between DJ Moore, Rome Odunze, and even Cole Kmet. They're going to play a lot of 2 tight end formations. It doesn't mean that both tight ends are going to be used the same way. When I saw them practice, everybody was lining up everywhere. It was really, really hard to get a beat on what any one guy was doing. But to Dan's point, there was one play where Caleb Williams hit Colston Loveland on an in-breaker in stride, and Loveland turned it into a 20-point play or 20-yard play, I should say. Hard to have a 20-point play in the NFL. A 20-yard play against the Bills' first-team defense. Now, it's practice, take it for what you will, but I do think that there is plenty of upside with Colston Loveland. I'm just worried about how much volume he will get from week to week that will make him a reliable fantasy starter.
I think in the case of both of your tight end bold predictions, there's got to be some uncertainty built in because, it is rookie tight ends. We don't typically see them play like Brock Bowers. And I think hopefully people don't have those expectations for those guys to be Brock Bowers. I just think in the case of Warren versus Loveland, you're starting to see a path to success from a target volume standpoint, whereas Loveland may have to show that. So Dan's point about him being maybe the Amon-Ra St. Brown, maybe a combination of Amon-Ra St. Brown and Sam Laporta, who clearly was a big factor in Ben Johnson's offense, that might take a little bit of time to unfold, but clearly there's so much upside with both of these guys. It makes it easy when you get to the great or late, taking one of these tight ends later, pair them with a Zach Ertz or Jake Ferguson.
Get both of
take
these
both.
guys.
I don't know if you want to go that route just because the floor might be a problem. The ceiling could be immense. But it depends on how much you like to just go, I'm playing to win or I'm playing to finish last in my league. And there is no in-between. Hopefully, you will find some options on the waiver wire if needed. All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back and get into my bold predictions here, I'll tell you why I think Justin Fields is going to be great on the ground once again, and maybe why there's going to be 10 awesome rookie running backs in 2025. Welcome back to Fantasy Football Today, presented by BetMGM. I'm Jamey, that's Dave, that's Dan. It's time for my bold predictions, and I'm going to start with one that maybe feels not as bold when you think about it, but it feels like the hate for Justin Fields is just starting to mount up a little bit because of why he stinks as a passer, and we're forgetting why he's great as a fantasy asset, and that's because of his legs. Justin Fields will lead all quarterbacks in rushing yards. He's one of 3 quarterbacks with 1,000 yards rushing on his resume. He is number 3 in yards per game for rushing quarterbacks all time. I don't care if he stinks as a passer. He's going to run for 900-plus yards, and he's going to be a top 10 fantasy quarterback. I know, Dave, you're starting to push back against Fields being a good fantasy quarterback. This is why he's going to be good, is because he's going to run.
Yeah, but if he doesn't win games, I don't know how long he'll be under center for the Jets. It doesn't even matter because the new coach isn't going to tolerate it. More importantly, he's had a hard time staying healthy, and now you're going to count on him running all over the place. I get it to draft him late, make him your starter to begin the season. If something happens to him, man, he's easy to replace. I wouldn't reach for him, though, and I like a lot of other quarterbacks better, including Drake May, including Jared Goff. those are two quarterbacks I would happily take ahead of Justin.
I understand that sentiment, but he is going to go for maybe 1,000 yards rushing, and you don't get that at that position. If he goes for 1,000 and 3,000, he's going to be a top, potentially 6 quarterback. I mean, he was averaging over 24 fantasy points per game last year in the final 4 starts for the Steelers. Next bold prediction I got, Dan, I'm going to come to you after I say this one, which is Jordan Mason, Zach Charbonnet, and Braylon Allen will be the best running backs on their team this year. So Mason better than Aaron Jones, Charbonnet better than Ken Walker, Allen better than Breece Hall. Tell me why I'm wrong.
I can't tell you why you're wrong on a lot of these. I like Mason over Jones. I like Sharbs over Walker. With Braylon Allen and Breece, you know what? I'm with you on that too. I don't really foresee Breece, and that one's going to be short scoring on both accounts, I think. But yeah, I can't deny. Dave, do you have anything pushback on any of those?
I mean, I like the value of Charbonnet better than Ken Walker, but if Ken Walker, speaking of staying healthy, if he can stay healthy, I would imagine he'll be far and away the best running back in Seattle.
And the bold prediction, you don't see it on the screen here, but is they will be their best running backs on their teams without injury. So at some point during the season, we see these guys take over.
I could see that really early for Mason.
It could happen for Braylon Allen too, based on, like you said, Breece Hall could get traded.
Look better this preseason.
Yep. All right, last bold prediction for me that we'll get to here is there's going to be 10 rookie running backs, 10 that finish in the top 30 in PPR
got names?
points per game. Of course I have names.
Right.
Ashton Genty, Omarion Hampton, Trevion Henderson, R.J. Harvey, Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt.
Oh, good. They're keeping track.
Jaden Blue, Basil Tootin, Ollie Gordon, Dylan Sampson, and Woody Marks. So the first ones are obvious. Genty, Hampton, Henderson, Harvey. You can see that happening. You see the path right now for Bill, JCM. Easily could be the best running back there for the Commanders. The next group is a little bit tougher to figure out how the path is going to unfold, but Jaden Blue could easily be the best guy there for the Cowboys as long as he stays healthy. We know Javonte Williams not exactly the best. Tootin, we could see a trade for the Jaguars. We also could see Tootin eventually take over a la Bucky Irving last year under Liam Cohen. Ollie Gordon could be the number 2 running back there for the Dolphins and could score a lot of touchdowns in tandem with Devon Achane, who's dealing with a calf injury. Dylan Sampson, we may not see Quinshon Judkins all season, and Sampson right now the starting running back for the Browns based on their last preseason game. And Dave, right before we started the show, you said no update on Joe Mixon according to D'Amico Ryans. Well, we got Nick Chubb, who's 100, and Dameon Pierce, who knows where he's going to be. This could be Woody Marks by the end of the season. So I could see 10 guys maybe being the best running backs in their respective backfields.
Let's talk about Tootin, Gordon, Sampson. 3 running backs that are absolutely worth a pick round 9 or later. Sampson, you could probably wait till round 12 to go.
Not anymore. Not after what we just saw.
He did look great.
Yep.
And I think he could end up being the best Browns running back to begin the season. And then once Quinshon Judkins gets going, Judkins will take over. I like what I've seen from Ollie Gordon. I've definitely liked what I've seen from Basil Tootin. And if the Jaguars trade Tank Bigsby, you're going to see Tootin's ADP go right up.
We love this rookie running back class, and 10 guys will be in the top 30 for PPR points per game this year. All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back and get to your questions here on Fantasy Football Today, it's Ask FFT next after the break. Welcome back to Fantasy Football Today, presented by BetMGM. It's time for your questions. Let's go. Jason wants to know, picking from the 105 in a 10-team, 2-quarterback home league, half PPR, league values the running back spot still. So, Dave, who would you target at 105, elite quarterback or running back wide receiver? So 2 quarterbacks, but would you take a running back first?
I would take one of the quarterbacks because you're getting one of the studs, and it'll be potentially a top 3 stud if other people picking before you take a running back.
Especially in a 10-team league, the running backs in round 2 should be great. Next question. Dan, drafted Hampton and Henderson on the same team. Am I crazy? So got Nico Collins round 1, Puka Nacua round 2, Hampton in round 3, Kittle round 4, amazing value on Henderson in round 5, Emeka Egbuka, Tony Pollard. Very concerned with Emeka Egbuka being wide receiver 3. Where did I go wrong? I don't think you went wrong at all.
Yeah, there's no place you went wrong here. Your team looks stacked to me. I can't believe you were able to get Henderson that late.
Yeah, way to brag. Thank you. We appreciate it.
Yeah, you went wrong sending the post.
Michael wants to know, redraft league, 1 keeper, have 4 guys close in ADP, King Henry, Christian McCaffrey, Nico Collins, Malik Neighbors. Who are you keeping, Dave? So of those 4, who's your 1 keeper?
It's going to be Christian McCaffrey. One more year, we will roll the dice on CMC as a stud.
I'm surprised you didn't ask your question. If you keep them forever, you're obviously keeping Neighbors. But yes, in the redraft league, you're keeping McCaffrey. All right, Dan, Joe wants to know, 1 keeper league, have the first pick. Brian Thomas at 5.1. Ryan Thomas around 5 or Chuba Hubbard around 8. Who are you keeping?
Brian Thomas, no doubter.
Yeah, I would agree. Value's too good in round 5. More dub. Nope, we got this one already. So
yeah, this is the same question.
I mean, this guy's just bragging all over the place here. So do we have any other questions? All right, we're out. So Dub, we love your team. Congratulations, you're going to win your fantasy league. Make sure you check out Fantasy Football Today. You can find us wherever podcasts are available. Download the QR code as well. Check us out on YouTube to find out all of our great information. Remember, the regular season is approaching, so we're going to help you dominate your drafts. We're also going to help you with the waiver wire moves you need, the starts, sits, all the things, trade chart, everything you need to dominate your fantasy league. The Fantasy Football Today podcast, wherever podcasts are found. And don't forget, Wednesday, 4 o'clock Eastern, is our draftathon from 4 to 7. We hope to continue to raise money for St. Jude. For Dan Schneier, for Dave Richard, for myself, for our great production staff, thanks for watching and listening to Fantasy Football Today.